Hello? Welcome to Night, where the dark speaks and true stories haunt. This channel brings you real horror experiences, urban legends, and chilling encounters that people have truly lived through. Every episode is based on actual stories, told in a way that pulls you into the shadows. From haunted houses to unsolved disappearances, strange family secrets to ancient curses, we explore the kinds of stories that leave you questioning what's real. Perfect for late night listening or a lonely commute home. Subscribe and let the night in. If everyone can leave a comment to let me know where you are listening from in the world. Story 1. A missing child. I was sent to investigate a missing child. What I found still haunts me. I took early retirement 2 months ago. They say it was voluntary, but if you read between the lines, the transfer, the psych eval, the months of leave before I resigned, you'd see the truth. I've never told anyone what really happened in Barley Hill. Not the chief superintendent, not the shrink they assigned me, not even my wife, who thinks it was just burnout. It wasn't burnout. I know what I saw, and more importantly, I know what I heard in that cellar. But I'll start at the beginning. Barley Hill is a speck on the map in Northumberland. 2 rows of cottages, 1 pub, 1 post office, and fields that go on forever. The kind of place where time folds in on itself. I was stationed nearby in Hexham and sent out to assist local plod when a girl went missing. Her name was Abigail Shaw, 12 years old. Disappeared on a Tuesday afternoon between school and home. She should have walked back with her friend Lucy, but told her she was cutting through the woods to take a shortcut. Except there was no shortcut, just miles of dense forest and farmland. Her parents were frantic. Understandably, I met them the night she vanished. Good people, salt of the earth types. Mr. Shaw was shaking so bad he couldn't hold his tea. Mrs. Shaw kept glancing at the clock every few seconds like if she stared hard enough, time would reverse. The Barley Hill constable, a man named Pritchard, was already out of his depth. No CCTV in the village. No reports of strangers. No signs of struggle. I took over coordination and brought in dogs and drones by the next morning. We combed every square meter of woodland for 3 days. Nothing. Not a footprint. Not a thread of clothing. She'd vanished like smoke. Then on the 4th day, we found something. It was a dog walker, about 2 miles from the village, near an abandoned farmstead. Old place called Greaves Orchard. The dog had gone ballistic near the collapsed barn and started digging at the earth. That's where we found the ribbon. Pink, satin with a tiny silver bell. Abigail's mother confirmed it was hers. The barn itself was unsafe. Roof half caved in, floor rotted. But below it, there was a trapdoor, sealed with rusted iron bolts. And this is where things get odd. The floor above that trapdoor hadn't collapsed. There was no way the dog could have smelled anything through solid oak beams and a foot of earth. But it did. And it led us to that exact spot like it had been called there. We broke the lock. The air that came up smelled like old stone and wet iron. We descended. The cellar was far too large, carved into the bedrock with old tools. Pritchard said the farmhouse had no records of underground storage, no history, no maps, not even local gossip. But here it was, 15 feet underground, with stone shelves, iron hooks, and something that looked a lot like restraints bolted to the wall. We searched every inch. No girl, just one small shoe, tucked behind a broken crate, and carved into the wall, 6 feet up, alive, written in chalk, still fresh. That word stayed with me. We brought in forensics. They lifted Abigail's prints off the shoe, the ribbon too, but nothing else. No DNA, no signs of anyone else. We interviewed every villager twice. I walked the woods alone some nights, flashlight in one hand, recorder in the other. That's when it started. At first, it was small things. My mobile would turn on in the middle of the night and start recording. Voice memos I'd make, just static and faint whispers I couldn't make out. Then came the voice. 3 times over the next week, I woke to a faint knock on my guest house door at precisely 2:11 a.m. Each time, I opened it to find no one. On the third night, I stayed up and recorded the hallway. When I reviewed the footage the next morning, my stomach turned. At 2:11 a.m., the camera shook slightly, then captured my own voice whispering, "She's in the orchard." Except I never said that. I didn't tell anyone. Didn't want to be pulled off the case. Instead, I went back to Greaves' orchard. Daylight this time. I paced the area around the barn. Found nothing, but the feeling, that pressure behind the eyes, that wrongness in the air, it stayed with me. The next night, I got a call. An old woman named Mags Willoughby. She lived alone at the edge of the village, nearest to the orchard. She'd seen something. She said, her voice trembled over the line. 2 nights ago, she told me when I got there, I saw a girl running across the field. Did you recognize her? She looked like the Shaw girl, but she wasn't right. I frowned. Not right how? She was barefoot, mud up to her knees, but her clothes weren't torn. And her face, Mags hesitated. It didn't look scared. It looked calm, like she was walking in her sleep. Where did she go? Toward the orchard, toward the barn. I stayed out there until dawn. Nothing. A week passed. The official search was scaled down. The press moved on. But I didn't. The case got inside me. I barely slept, ate standing up. My wife said I talked in my sleep, muttering about cellars and chalk and ribbons. Then, one night, a storm rolling over the moors, I returned to Greaves' orchard one last time. The barn was creaking in the wind. The trees swayed like they were trying to whisper to each other. I descended the cellar steps with my torch and recorder. Everything was as we'd left it, empty. But the word alive was gone, scrubbed clean. In its place, one word, newly written in shaky chalk. Colder. I turned, heart pounding. A sound behind me, soft, delicate, a giggle. I spun and caught in the beam. A girl, pale, dirty feet, wearing a nightgown. Abigail. I whispered. She just stared at me, smiling. I reached out, but she stepped backward into the darkness and vanished. I ran to the spot. Nothing, just stone wall. I don't know how long I stood there, torch shaking. Eventually I left. Didn't sleep that night. Didn't go back the next day. They found her 3 days later, wandering along the roadside near Hayden Bridge. Disoriented, clothes clean, no bruises, no injuries. Dehydrated, but otherwise unharmed. The doctors said she'd been fed recently. No signs of trauma. She didn't remember anything. She just kept repeating the same thing. The man in the cellar was nice. They assumed it was a coping mechanism, a way to process fear. But I knew better. I asked to see her one last time. Off the record. I just wanted to ask a single question. I sat across from her in the hospital room. She looked at me calmly, swinging her legs off the side of the bed. Abigail, I said, was the man in the cellar old or young? She tilted her head. He didn't have a face. They closed the case. Everyone celebrated a miracle, the girl who came back. But I know what I saw in that cellar, and I know what I heard, because the night after she was found, I played one of the voice memos from my phone. It was my voice again, muttering, over and over, "She's not the same. She's not the same. She's not the same." Then silence. Then a child's voice, soft, like it was speaking right next to the microphone. "Neither are you." Story 2. If you are in possession of a love potion, now is your time to reconsider using it. It's as the title says, if you have bought or made a love potion, throw it away. Now, and if you still haven't, let me explain why you should. I used to have what I consider to be the perfect life. A tight-knit community of friends, a loving wife, a well-paying job as a pediatrician, and a warm and supportive family. My wife and I were planning to have children, wondering whether we should adopt or if one of us should carry the pregnancy. And my parents were excited at the prospect of grandchildren. And then one day, it all abruptly went to shit. The day started normal enough. Did a few consultations without any trouble. But then, I gave a lollipop to a very brave little girl after her vaccine shot, and as her tiny fingers grabbed the stick, her fingertips brushed against my hand and sent white-hot pain through my whole arm. Taken aback, I quickly snatched away my hand, big eyes peering at me curiously. I played it off as static shock, but it kept happening. Coming back from work later that day, I leaned in to kiss my wife. The second our lips made contact, I reared back in pain. Kissing her felt like putting my mouth on hot iron. Seeing me in pain, panic seized her, and she tried touching my arm in a comforting gesture. But again the contact of her skin against mine sent a jolt of pain so violent I took several steps away from her. See, call an ambulance. At the ER, the doctors were pretty much the same. If they wore gloves and only touched me for a short time, it was fine, like taking out a tray of baked goods with oven mitts on. The second naked skin made contact. However, the pain was unbearable. Their first thought was an allergic reaction. They asked me what I'd done or eaten that day, but I hadn't done anything out of the ordinary. I'd put on the same cologne, eaten the same lovingly cooked breakfast, drunk the same coffee at the same coffee shop, eaten the same sandwich from the same bakery. As it could be a matter of repeated exposure to the allergen, the doctor prescribed some blood work. I anxiously waited for the results. That first night in bed with my wife was hell. Force of habit kept making us touch by accident. A playful and reassuring foot on my shin felt like having the skin of my leg peeled off. An attempt at hugging her ended with me jumping clear of the bed, wailing, her fingers brushing my face as she turned in her sleep. A white-hot iron poker dragged across my eyes. I ended up sleeping on the couch. The blood work came clean. A neurological issue was the doctor's next guess. They made me do an MRI. To no avail. Something in the staff's eyes turned off then. A light, I later learned, was their desire to help, extinguishing itself with a speed that meant it had never been very strong to begin with. It was obvious that they no longer believed me, that they thought my pain was psychological, somatic, and therefore in their mind, no longer real. They weren't the only ones. Over the course of following months, my wife's support waned until it turned into resentment. She took the fact that I couldn't touch anyone as a sign that I didn't want to touch her, that it was somehow a repressed homophobic part of me that was balking at the idea of starting a family together and manifested it that way, which was ridiculous. I hadn't dated men since high school 15 years ago. I hadn't even had feelings for one beyond friendship. The first and only man I had fallen for had become my first girlfriend. My wife knew all that. It had even become an inside joke about how effective my gaydar was. It did nothing to appease her doubts. Sometimes, it made me want to scream at her, to yell, "What about in sickness and in health, huh?" But other times, I understood, what if she was right? And even if she wasn't, didn't she have the right to be angry? What if we had a child, and I couldn't even hold it? Little by little, everyone around me left, or I cut them off. My wife was the first to go, of course. I knew she had been cheating on me for a few weeks by the time I offered we divorced, leaving her hurt, but the look of relief on her face when I offered we end things hurt even more. I went back to my parents' house, looking for comfort, but even there I quickly felt unwelcome. My family had always been very tactile. My parents' attempt at comfort almost always involving a hug, a pat, or a comforting hand on my arm, all of which I kept evading. I tried meeting with my friends, but always made me incredibly anxious. In summer, the heat made it hard to cover enough to avoid touch. In winter, it was easier, but even then, overheated interiors were hell. Worse than the pain was the constant fear of it, of a store clerk's fingertips brushing my palm when handing me back my change, of a stranger bumping into me, of a friend absent-mindedly leaning in to kiss my cheek. All those casual brushes of skin I had never thought about before that now brought pure agony. I felt like there was never enough layers of protection between myself and the searing pain other humans could inflict me. Unsurprisingly, my work too suffered from my new condition and subsequent paranoia. It was a bad look for a doctor to treat all their patients like they were highly contagious. Always wearing gloves, keeping touches to the strict minimum. I tried to compensate by being very friendly, but it was like both children and parents could feel something was off. The kids got restless. The parents started to suspect I had some sort of problem, add word of mouth into the mix, and the number of patients coming to my office declined steadily. You would think eventually I'd build some pain tolerance, but if anything, it got worse. The oven was getting slimmer and slimmer. Soon I couldn't take the subway during rush hour, even clothed from head to toe, and could only go out when there were less people in the streets. I had to ask a colleague to put me on sick leave because I couldn't do consultations anymore, a year after the symptoms had first appeared. And I was at rock bottom. That's when I met Frank. I was at a cafe, so tired and miserable I didn't look where I was going and bumped into him. I braced myself for misery, tensing every muscle, but nothing happened. Completely taken aback, I held a hand. He offered me to get up without thinking. I was already regretting my choice when our palms closed against one another, but then nothing. No pain. "Hey, you all right?" he asked, but I just stayed there frozen, gaping at him, hand tightened around his, feeling the touch of another human being for the first time in a year. I had never realized how real a phenomenon touch starvation was. Of course, as a physician, I knew it was a thing, but it was different to experience it myself. As horrible as the deprivation had been, the euphoria of being able to touch someone again was unlike anything I'd ever felt before. The rush of endorphins was such a high, I almost swooned like a cartoon character, coupled with our accidental bumping into. It seemed like a scene straight out of a romantic comedy. Love at first sight. Cue the violins and the platitudes about time stopping. "Are you okay?" Frank repeated. "Yes, I think you might be my soulmate" was not something I could just spring on the man. So having completely forgotten everything I'd painstakingly memorized in my teenage years about how to act around boys, I blurted, "I'm Nadia. Can I have your number?" Thankfully, that only made him laugh and blush a little, which was cute. He probably thought he was living something completely unreal. "You and me both, buddy." When I went back home, I realized just how ridiculous I'd been. What if this had all been a coincidence? What if I was just cured? I went and hugged my mother that night. For the first time in a year, it felt like being burned alive. After a good, long cry alone in the bathroom, I came to terms with the reality of the situation. It really was something about Frank, and only him. Unsurprisingly, we quickly started dating after that, which led to a lot of soul searching. I'm 33, and have been identifying as a lesbian for the last 13 years. So it was a massive shock to fall for a man. It made me queasy to think my ex-wife might have been right, that it might have been my subconscious trying to tell me life with her wasn't what I really wanted. Even if it had seemed so real, dating Frank was fine, for the most part. Touching another human was a luxury I had clearly taken for granted. Every time we held hands or hugged was incredible after months without it. More intimate gestures were more complicated. Kissing was still mostly okay, but as much as I had missed the touch of another human, anything beyond that made me really uncomfortable. I tried a couple times to psych myself up when we were kissing, and his touches turned more pointed, but I just didn't feel any of the desire I'd felt for my ex-wife or girlfriends over the years. And I wasn't a teenager anymore. I knew what desire felt like for me, and I knew that I didn't feel for Frank. But he was also the only human whose touch wasn't physically painful. At least Frank wasn't pushy. Of course, he was a bit bummed that intimacy between us was going at a snail pace, but he was content to wait. I had told him that I had a condition that made touch difficult, and he was very understanding. "I love you, and I'm not going anywhere. I'll wait for as long as it takes," he told me. At the time, I was relieved and grateful to finally have someone in my life who was willing to give me the grace no one had given me in over a year. Now, however, I realized his words had a very different meaning. Personality-wise, Frank reminded me of some of my high school boyfriends. Before I'd realized I wasn't attracted to them. He was gentle, shy, not very manly. Actually, for some reason, he reminded me a little of my last boyfriend, who had, incidentally, turned to be my first girlfriend. Unlike her, though, Frank was very much a straight, cisgender man, and he would stay that way until he died. It sometimes led to friction. After dating women for so long, there were expectations I wasn't used anymore. Not that dating women doesn't come with its own problems. Relationships are hard. At first, it was fun to get the princess treatment, not paying at restaurants, or having him open doors for me. It was novel. It stopped being cute when he told me I shouldn't wear heels because it made me look taller than him, or that he was uncomfortable that I earned so much money as a doctor. He also seemed really upset by the fact that I had had a life before him, sentimental and sexual, but we always managed to iron things out. While this was happening, I kept thinking a lot about my first girlfriend, Aurora, and how different our relationship had been from the get-go, even when she'd still looked like a man. We'd broken up ages ago, but for some reason she kept popping up in my mind. After a bit, I realized I might have missed her. She wasn't the only one. Beyond the isolation that had come from my debilitating fear of touch, being a lesbian had been such an integral part of my identity. For so long, I felt deeply uncomfortable reconnecting with my friends now. I didn't feel like I belonged to the bars, cafes, or club I'd gone to. Didn't want to talk to the friends who's been at our wedding with my ex. I was all the more uncomfortable that I'd let a lot of biphobia fly from said friends over the years, and was now terrified of reaping what I'd sown. And then one day, everything came crashing down. I was getting bubble tea at a little shop near my house when I heard a voice call behind me. Nadia? And there she was, Aurora. She was a vision, radiant like her name. She looked exactly as I remembered her, and yet nothing like it. The numbers of piercings on her ears and face had doubled, and new tattoos had bloomed on her arms, some covering older, less well-made ones. Her style had gone from chaotic young goth to sophisticated older goth, and it suited her perfectly. Aurora, I whispered, I can't believe it's you. It's been ages. How have you been? I could have just said everything was fine, but it wasn't. Not really. And so, actually, this last year has been really weird. Aurora had always been into weird stuff. Astrology, the occult, witchcraft, that kind of things. That was one of the things that had contributed to our breakup. I used to be a bit of an asshole in uni, not really understanding the role belief played in people's lives, and how someone could believe in that crap while planning to work in healthcare. She, in turn, didn't understand why I was so strongly against something she viewed as harmless. We both learned since then. Aurora had certainly learned the hard way some beliefs are anything but harmless. I told her everything, and I mean everything. How I hadn't been able to touch people in over a year. How weird it felt that the only person I could touch was a man, and how strange it was to be in a straight relationship again. I was expecting Aurora to be surprised by my story and to reassure me on my sexual orientation. She was bi after all. What I did not expect was for her to look at me with a quietly horrified expression, the same kind I'd used a decade ago, when she'd offhandedly mentioned something her family had done that she hadn't realized was abusive yet. Nadia, what you're describing, it sounds a lot like a love potion. What? I laughed, but she wasn't joking. Well, some people call it a love potion, but it's a euphemism really. It doesn't make you love the person who used it. It just makes you dependent of them. Aren't you a little old to believe in that stuff? I deal with that stuff for a living. Started as a side hustle, became quite profitable. Not here nor there. So what? I'm telling you about my very real problems, and you just see an opportunity to sell me some woo shit? Are you planning to rope me into an MLM scheme next? Nadia, you had everything you wanted in life. Are you telling me that without that freak disease coming seemingly out of nowhere, you have dropped your tight community, gorgeous and loving wife, and high-paying job for some random guy named Frank who's insecure about a height? Fuck. Aurora was right. This wasn't like me. Man or not, I had never been the type to fall in love with a stranger. And even if my preferences had suddenly changed, I had plenty of male friends and acquaintances who were way more my type than Frank would ever be. But why? How? I couldn't imagine why anyone would use a love potion on me, especially a man. There were thousands, if not millions, of women way more conventionally attractive than I'd ever be. Also, how had Frank even managed it? Didn't a potion need to be drunk in some way? How had a stranger managed to poison me? Listen, I need to get back to my day job. Aurora said, but give me your phone number and we'll get to the bottom of this. I took out my phone. The background picture a photo of Frank, and I that was now starting to feel more unsettling than cute. My uneasiness was nothing compared to Aurora's reaction. Her face blanched when she saw it. Nadia, that's Francis Junet. That couldn't be. I knew Francis Junet. He'd been one of Aurora's friends pre-transition. He'd had a crush on me and had been incredibly obnoxious about it. Creepy, even. Aurora hadn't liked his behavior at the time. Even more so when her group of friends had started acting like it was fine. Just boys being boys. She completely cut ties with him after that, investing in her other friendships and our relationship, which had eventually helped her figure out who she was. What? There's no way I would have recognized him. Would you? After that first incident, I made sure you wouldn't cross paths. Fuck, that was probably why I'd been thinking about Aurora so much in the last few months. She was a link between me and that creep I thought to be a stranger. I had kissed Francis Junet. I had very nearly had sex with Francis fucking Junet. I was gonna be sick. Can I make it stop? Aurora's expression became very somber and my stomach dropped. Yes, but it's not easy. I left the bubble tea shop, absent-mindedly running my hand through the new piece of jewelry around my neck in a self-soothing motion, and immediately called Frank. I demanded that we meet that night. He must have misread my tone, mistaken my nervousness for eagerness, because when I came to his Haussmannian apartment, everything was suspiciously clean and tidy. Even a gigantic mirror embedded in the wall was spotless. I could imagine why he cleaned it. I didn't let him kiss me, or get near me. His touch might have not hurt, but it did not bring any comfort anymore. Instead, it made my skin crawl. Frank, I know about the love potion. The love? He stared at me with wide eyes. I think his surprise was genuine, because the question he asked next definitely wasn't, Babe, what are you talking about? Please, don't play dumb with me. I know you're the reason why I can't touch other people. Oh, because you want to touch other people? He said with derisive tone and an ugly expression of dismissal, despite not being attracted to him in that way. I had never found him ugly until that very moment. Francis, I haven't been able to hug my parents in over a year because of you. The name gave him a pause. So you remember me. Now I do, yeah. You've changed a lot, and I only saw you once or twice then. He'd sent me SMS for months, stalked me on Facebook, tried to get in contact with me through common acquaintances. But Aurora had shielded me from the worst of it, so I'd barely seen his face. Would it have changed anything if I had recognized him earlier? His brow pinched, his eyes watered. It was unsettling. What right did he have to cry? I've always loved you, Nadia. Always. But it was like you didn't even see me back then. You only had eyes for Nicholas. I shuddered when I heard the disgust in his voice, but did not correct him. I did not want him to know anything about Aurora's life now that he was out of it. And then I saw you again at the cafe I had just started working at, and it was like fate, he continued, oblivious to my discomfort. I knew I couldn't let you go again. That was 10 years ago, Francis. So, what's a decade in the face of true love? This isn't true love. I yelled, appalled. Of course it is. Now you finally need me like I need you. But I don't need you. Not really. I don't even love you. I just don't have a choice. You say that now. But if we spend more time together, then I'll just resent you more. Now I was the one crying. Please, let me go. Move on. There's a way to do that. I know about the fucking ritual. I'm not doing it. He said, cutting me. The tears were still there, on his cheeks, glittering in the low light. But his voice and face were hard, cruel, determined. Now that he finally had what he wanted, he wasn't going to let go. The ritual to get rid of the effects of the potion was a week long. It required both the user and the recipient's willing involvement. And Francis would, indeed, never do it. I could see it clear as day. He might pretend he would, if I begged or screamed or cried enough, if I left long enough. But ultimately he would bargain, would postpone, would blame. He already was. And how long until my own energy and patience ran out? How long until I was too exhausted to leave? I see, I said quietly. I took hold of the pendant Aurora had given me, my fist shaking as I held it in a tight grip. I took one long look at the man who had taken nearly everything from me, the man who had poisoned and isolated me, just so that I would look his way. And with all the hatred I felt for him, I pulled the pendant quickly, as hard as I could. The band of the necklace, when taut, then snapped, the metal clasp breaking more easily than it ought to. I don't know what I expected to happen. Aurora had been purposefully vague about what the results would be. The old and massive mirror behind Frank started rippling. I frowned, unsure what I was seeing. It was so dark. Had it been this dark earlier? All of a sudden, a gigantic hand came out of the reflecting surface. It closed around Frank's entire body, cutting his breath. I heard bones break. Not a drop of the blood that poured from his mouth made it to ground as the hand behind the mirror retreated. It's been 2 months since then. Frank has been reported missing. Wherever his body is, I don't think the police will find it. I've resumed work, and patients are slowly trickling in again. I could leave my parents' house, but I think I'll stay a little longer. It feels too good to get to hug them in the morning. I've also reconnected with my friends, giving them an edited version of what happened, one that involves drugs and an abusive relationship but no love potion. I'm unbelievably grateful for their hugs of comfort. Maybe in a few months I'll contact my ex-wife again, explain what happened. I don't want her to feel guilty, but I think she deserves to know. Might save her a few hours of therapy, or add to it. Aurora and I are also meeting regularly. I don't know if it will turn into anything. For now, we're taking it easy. So, yeah, if you have acquired a love potion, I strongly advise you to reconsider using it, because there are in fact 2 ways to reverse its effects. One is a week-long ritual for which both parties need consent. They need to want, from the bottoms of their hearts, to get rid of the effects of the thing. The other, way faster and easier process is to kill the person who used the potion. And now that my story is out there, your target has way more chances of knowing what the effects of a love potion are and how to make them stop. You have been warned.